And welcome to the podcast. This is the last episode of the Minor Prophet Season 4, Episode 12. We're looking at the book of Malachi. I thank you, Mark Jones and Tyrean. The topic is Malachi, and as we were just discussing before officially beginning, this is the last of the Minor Prophets. It's the last book of the Old Testament. We are just finished Thanksgiving, and we're moving into the season of Advent. The Minor Prophets, as well as the Old Testament, as Christians, we look forward. We see them as looking forward to the coming of Christ, and so it's a transitional podcast roundtable. We're wrapping up the season. We're transitioning into Christmas. We are anticipating Christ as we read through the Bible. We are reflecting on the prophets and as they anticipate Christ, and so there's almost too much to talk about in order to kind of distill it down. It would be easier if there was a one focused piece, and on top of all that, Matt Misteric gave a great message on Malachi and gave us some really poignant and thoughtful questions. So with that, I think I'll just kind of roll the ball out there and hope one of you picks it up and runs with it. How about that? So any thoughts on the book of Malachi, or just where we are in the season of life, season, I guess of the podcast, but, of the Bible, etc.
Well, I'm certainly glad that in between seasons, we don't have to suffer 400 years of silence. I'm not sure that we can endure that. I wonder, as a society and as a world and a culture, what would that be like? To have that now, would it bring people together? I don't know. I would say I've been pondering all week Matt's question number 2, and keeping God sovereign in everyday life. I guess I would like to think I do that, but that, to nail that down, keeping God sovereign in everyday life, I don't do a very good job of that. That's a tough one for me. So I've been that's been rolling around my head for all week long since Matt's message.
The daily sovereignty thing.
Daily sovereignty in everyday life. The routine. Do I keep God sovereign in the routine of or the rut of life?
Yeah, I had some of the stuff that I'm working on, I'm dealing with at work. It reminds me of this, is that, so bear with me for a second. You want to give people autonomy. People work better and are more effective, and they grow and they improve more when they have some autonomy. On the other hand, autonomy always leads to some kind of like failure, abuse, whatever, right? So there's always this tension in a professional setting, probably parenting too. Supervision is this tension between locking things down and being really rigid and opening it up and letting people grow and be responsible and learn and things like that. And as you were saying that, Mark, I think that's what I struggle with daily sovereignty as well. I feel like God kind of, like, sometimes I'll just say he taps me on the shoulder. It's really more of a hit upside the head, but he taps me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, get back on track. And I get back on track for a little bit. And then as soon as I have some freedom, it just starts becoming about me again. So yeah, that's a really, really hard one for me as well. It's a scary one for me also. Because I'm always worried about being pulled back in line.
Yeah, I had in Matt's message on Sunday, he talked about I can't remember, I wrote it down now. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was about how when we're complacent, sometimes we just kind of drift. And I think that's what you're talking about a little bit, that autonomy. Yeah. And I was thinking, I have to admit, I was in church and I fell on the ice a couple weeks ago in Spokane, and I hurt my knees, and I tried to walk it off because, that's what you do. You try to
walk it off.
Yeah, power it out, right? And found out I actually bruised both my knees, and it's going to be 4 to 8 weeks before I walk it off. But anyway, I thought to myself, well, God certainly must have thought I was getting complacent. I don't know that that's actually what God was thinking or why, I got to fall on the ice and hurt myself. But I was like, there's not a whole lot you can do when you're laying on your back with your knees above your heart and you're icing them. You're like icing, elevating, thinking to yourself, okay, what is there to do here? I mean, I could scroll on my phone, but really I'm in about as helpless a position as you could get for those 10 minutes at a time that I'm icing my knees. And so I've been trying to use that time to pray, but I can't say that I always do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this what it takes for God to get my attention? And how sad is that? So obviously I struggle with God being sovereign in my life. And it's not the Malachi passage, it's the Psalm 63 passage that we were it was one of the readings this week. It's Psalm 63 verse 3. I've got it on my screen over here. Because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. Actually, that's not your steadfast love is better than life. I'm like, do I ever actually act like that? Like God's love is better than life. I mean, to me, that's ultimate, looking at God and saying he's sovereign over everything.
How do you not drift? I mean, I feel like that the only time, and I'm going to confess real anxiety of saying this out loud, and like, superstitious God's gonna get me. But the only time I'm really dependent and focused and connected with God is during times of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to live in crisis all the time, but I do want to live connected with God.
Mm-hmm.
I've had brief moments where I'm happy, where like and literally mountaintop moments. And I think it's actually thanks to my father-in-law when we've gone skiing with him. And John's parents have taken us to, they've taken us to Whistler. I mean, I don't know that we could have afforded those trips without their help. And we were literally standing on a mountaintop and he's like, wow, praise God for how gorgeous this is.
Mm.
And sadly, I know the first time he said that, I was like, oh, yeah. Like, but thankfully, I feel like there are other people in my life who help me remember to praise God.
Right.
And I'm really thankful that I don't have to figure it out on my own. I would have, even though I'm an introvert, I would not be a very good hermit. Like not I'm someone who prays God all the time kind of hermit. So, yeah, I don't know. I think community helps with the drift.
So go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, as soon as it takes me to figure out that I can't do it when I'm in over my head. When I get to a point that, I can't do it on my own, then it's like, oh Lord, help me. So how do you hang on to that in everyday life, just when things are going well, and when things are going well, sometimes I'll be mindful and say, thanks Lord, I'm glad that this is going well, but it's still a different it's when I'm in over my head that I really lean into God and I'm really reminded, I need you, Lord. Right.
Do you guys do, I'm sure you do, but maybe it's more, how often do you, it can be something innocuous. You're going through something and then you kind of pray and you realize like this is like step 23 for me. Why was this not step 1? Why didn't I, like, it almost like there's like an ashamed prayer, like, oh God, will you kind of help me here, even though I didn't think of you until now? I mean, like,
yeah.
I do that all the time. I mean, I think about it in just the littlest things, and granted, I'll give a disclaimer. I don't think God wants us necessarily thoughtlessly turning to him like, God, should I brush my teeth today? Can you just give me a sign to say, let me brush my teeth today? I think we are prepared and we are, equipped to go through life without kind of like an insecure dog constantly looking back up at God and like, is it okay if I take a step now? On the other hand, maybe it's kind of like that work analogy that I said before. That complacency drift that you said, Tyrean, where the longer I do mundane things of brushing my teeth and going to work, the less I recognize God's presence. Oh, man, it's just so, and maybe that's it, is to tie in the time of silence. I think in many ways that's what the time of silence is kind of God saying, listen, we've tried crisis, we've tried abundance and blessing, we've tried warnings, and we've tried exhortations and teachings and law. How about you do it on your own, see how that goes for you?
Yeah.
It reminded me, and this may be a stretch, I'm curious what your thoughts are. It reminded me of the parable of the prodigal son. And I do not have this kind of put together, but it's been tumbling around in my head all week, that this time of silence, I think there's a similarity between, both the kingdom of Israel and the prodigal son. I think there's a similarity between, clearly of our own lives and the prodigal son, but that time of silence, I think in many ways is the time that the prodigal son is away from the father. It's like kind of, Matt said, self-imposed. But the father didn't go after the son. The father didn't go chase him down. He let him be separate. So it is self-imposed, but it's also chosen. It's also allowed. Right. And in addition to that, I think about the son that was still there. You only see him really at the end of that story, the second son that complains, what about me? I've been here. And the father says, you've been here all along. And it hits me that, and again, this isn't really part of the parable, but it is, I think, implied that the son was there all along, but not listening. It's that complacency drift. Like, you've been here all along, and it's almost like, I have, and how much was the other son experiencing the time of silence as well? Even in the presence, in the proximity of his father. Anyway, this idea of the prodigal son as a parallel, not just with the progression of Israel, to Christianity, but also, in the Bible, the instruction, which is, it's almost like a father teaching his son, and the son's kind of like, yeah, I hear you, but I think I know better.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of the Old Testament moving into the New Testament. It's like, what, the only way you're going to figure this out is move out on your own, screw up, and figure out that the stuff that I'm telling you is right. Anyway, that's that. I have no questions. It's like, that is just where my brain has been thinking, and I don't know where to go with it. And I don't know if I'm, if there's anything there or not.
I do feel like that. I don't know, that the time of silence it's interesting, because I feel like, I can't remember the psalm. This is really bad. I don't remember the address for this, but I know there's a psalm in the Bible that talks about how, no matter how far we run, God is still there. In the darkness, God is still there. We can't flee to the depths of the ocean because God is still there. We're not there's no way to run from God. That sounds really stalkerish, but anyway, like, there's no way to actually get away from God because he's with us all the time. And because he's the Lord of the universe, he's everywhere. Like,
Yeah, right.
He is. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing where when we choose separation, God allows that, but yet it just takes, we don't even have to go on a long journey back to his house like the prodigal son does. We just need to like actually open our eyes or turn to God. And, yeah. And he's saying, I'm here, like, but it's interesting how it's amazing how close God is and how faithful he is, even in what we perceive as silence. So
yeah, it reminded like kind of what I just said about the other son. It's like, listen, he says, you've been with me all along, but it's, the inverse of that is I've been with you all along. It's like I've been here.
I'll have those times where I'm tempted to say, Lord, where have you been? And then I have to be mindful to say, Lord, where have I been? Because I know you've been right there, but where did I go? That puts it into perspective for me. But that's where I have to go.
Wow, that's really good, Mark. Okay, PTSD, childhood. I'm holding my mom's hand or whatever in the grocery store or whatever, and you let go, and you look around, and mom's gone. I think that's it. It's like, Mom, where did you go? And she's like, I'm right here. If you would just turn around. It's terrifying that you left me. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right here. How is this applied to both the time of silence, the complacency drift? I'm going to try to connect it. I don't know if there's a connection easily made. Complacency drift, the daily sovereignty, the time of silence, excuse me. And each one of these minor prophets, Malachi included, then points to the Messiah. And I think appropriately, given our week this week, there's a Thanksgiving that happens prior to that. There's an acknowledgement of God's provision and presence, and then a look forward to the Messiah, Christ. Well, maybe I'll just say, where are you guys with that? I mean, what does Advent look like to you? And is this just a characteristic of humanity that we have to have these pauses in order to reflect, in order to anticipate? I don't know.
I think we need reflection, like, and actually, I don't even know that I think that's necessarily about drifting as much as, in fact, sometimes I think, I don't know if I'm mishearing what you're saying, but I think reflection is a time when I take a moment, and that's when I do the turn. Like I need that pause, if you will, to go, oh, what am I doing? God is drawing me towards him, and I'm like just over here doing my little, I don't know, dance over the corner somewhere and not realizing what's going on. But sometimes I think we need that pause to actually open our eyes and kind of see how good God is. So I guess I feel like the pause and the reflection is part of acknowledging God's sovereignty. And and maybe that's just what you meant, and I just repeated it, but might be too
You're
early.
giving me way too much credit. Do you think I had a coherent thought there? Sorry.
I don't, yeah, no, I think that's, anyway, but I think we need that reflection time to really turn to Christ. And so maybe the silence is for our benefit. It's a gift in a way, like, as well as the provision of like, again, Psalm 63 talks about the water, and one of the other verses that we read talked about, water and bread and everything being offered for free.
Mm.
In addition to all of God's provision, he also gives us time to reflect and to turn to him. And so I don't know if that's, 400 years is a long time to reflect. Honestly, I think that would be really hard. But I think I don't know, looking forward to Jesus is in that with the prophets is acknowledging their need for Emmanuel, for Christ, for God with us, all the time. And how blessed are we that we have Christ with us all the time, and yet we still understand where the prophets were. Unfortunately, we could really get what was going on with the drift.
At least strikes me. I think that's really powerful, Tyrean. Recognizing the need for Emmanuel, for God with us. That's tied into what we've already been talking about. This really subtle awareness shift of leaving God, coming back to God, versus he's always there.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think, I guess a little more academically, with Israel, God's in the temple, God's in the pillar, God's in the cloud, God speaks through the prophets. There's a presence of God with Israel all the time. And he says this, in the minor prophets, well, really in all the prophets. But that may be the impetus is stop looking at me like a thing that you have to visit or come back to. I'm there. So I need to make this clear to you. Like I need you to get Emmanuel. I need God with us. Well, I think that's really I think it's honestly, I wrote a book about this a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the more difficult things to, as you were saying, Mark, on the daily sovereignty. It is one of the more difficult pieces of it is you can't run from God. Like you said, Tyrean, he's always there. It's in every moment. God's there. The king is with me. And I'm going to act differently in the throne room than I am if I think I can leave it. Okay. So Advent is upon us, I'd say. Thanksgiving is behind us. There has been a dryness, a time of silence in the historically prior to Christ, that creates a thirst, and then God's about to give, or at least make clear, the living water. If you can put yourself into the position, or maybe I should say, what does this look like in our lives? If we put ourselves in the position of thirsty, or maybe from the prodigal son, anticipating the road back. I'm thirsty, but I am on my way to a fountain. What does that look like in a season of Advent? To live like we're walking toward an oasis.
There's a lot of hope and a determination to get there. If I was really thirsty in a desert, I would do anything to get to that oasis. When you really think about it, you put it that way, you're dying of thirst, you're gonna walk, crawl, or drag yourself to get to that oasis, because it represents life and hope and everything you need. So I guess a little bit of desperation as well as hope. I maybe that's not a good way to look at it, but I think if we really truly put ourselves in the position of not having life and needing it.
Desperation for what?
Desperation for living water, again, if you put it in that desert and thirst going towards that fountain, it's going to be our only thought. And I don't know, I just imagine what it would be like to be that thirsty. And that's the kind of thirst I think God wants us to have for him. And maybe desperation is too strong of a word, but I don't know, if I was truly dying of thirst or it's truly thirsty, I would be desperate for that water.
I kind of think about just the world we live in and how easy it would be to just give up on this world and just let the end come. But there's still work to do. But knowing that oasis is there, it just helps you to strive on, like just walking through that desert, strive on and get over what's going on around, because you know that there's a better thing ahead, moving forward. And I look forward to that. Often in our small group, we'll ask why this and why that.
Yeah.
And we'll always come to the answer. One day we'll know all the whys and we won't care anymore.
Right.
It won't matter to us. Yeah. Look, striving for that day, just moving forward for that day, and just knowing that God is present and even what can seem like chaos, and then looking for the joy and looking for where God is active in this world, and not getting caught up in all the turmoil that would seem to go on, but has gone on for eternity. It's not entirely different than thousands of years ago. I mean,
there's nothing new under the sun. No, I think that's a really good point, Mark. As believers, Advent's an interesting thing because we've already been there. And so it's a remembrance of that feeling of thirst. It's a remembrance. It's kind of like the Passover. It's a remembrance of delivery. And remember what it felt like. Remember what that thirst felt like. Do you still have that thirst? That kind of thing. But what I liked about what you just said is it's good to remember those things. Not saying it's not. It's really good. It's good to also remember that a lot of times what we're doing is we're leaving the oasis and going back into the desert with the security that I have the water. That I'm now going to talk to or meet or guide thirsty people, and I have the water. It's probably another big conviction. Do I do that? I don't know. But maybe that's another way to look at Advent is remembering it, but recognizing how many people out there are, especially during the season, are chasing after life that's just false. Like they feel that, but it's kind of like a false Advent. It's I hope this will be that, and it's just not.
I mean, when I think about being that thirsty person on the way to the oasis, that is life without Christ, except for the fact that they don't know what the oasis looks like. They don't know what direction it is, and we've all been there at some point in our lives. And if you don't know what direction the oasis is, you're just where do you go? You chase after the mirage that looks shimmery and pretty in the distance, and it's not the oasis. So it's a false hope. But we know where the oasis is. Like we've been carrying around part of it with us as we're out there in the world. And like you said, it is convicting because God asks us to leave the oasis and take that water, some of the living water, out there into the world and draw people to God.
Yeah, and he's saying I'm Emmanuel. I am. You don't need to take them to the oasis. I'm with you. I'm.
Yeah. Yep.
but I do love Christmas, and I am.
Mhm.
You know what I love about Christmas? I like Christmas music. I like all that stuff. I love the interaction with people. Which if you know me is probably an odd thing for me to say. I think I'd rather be in a quiet place in proximity of people that aren't talking with me than than at a party. I'm a, at least a good bit of me is introverted. But I do love, and maybe it's because there's an opportunity for quality engagement with people in the midst of all the hustle and bustle. There's opportunity for quality connection. People come home, or you go to see people you haven't seen for a while, or I don't know. I'm looking forward to that. Specifically, I love that about this season.
Yeah, kind of in that same vein, I like even in the hustle and bustle and the busyness of everything, it seems like everybody's attitudes are a little bit better. I went to the grocery store the Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving, right? It was packed full already, but everybody was in a better nature, more patient. It was a good example of humanity that you don't see every day. And I think I see more of that in the Advent season. For whatever their reasons are in their lives, there's just a better attitude during that season. I enjoy that, certainly.
I know it's going to sound really odd, but I always feel like it's a fresh start time of year. I know maybe that's just coming from a really traditional Lutheran background in my childhood anyway. The idea that this is the beginning of the year. This is the Advent is the first day of the new year, and I feel like maybe it's all about the anticipation of homecomings and of Christmas itself, but I feel like there's just this renewed sense of joy that people have. I guess it's kind of what Mark is talking about, an anticipation of or the hope for good times and good community. But I don't know. I don't know exactly what I specifically look forward to, other than a lot of light. I feel like I really feel like this is the darkness at this time of year kind of gets to me, and I'm so thankful for all the Christmas lights and all the ways that people do things to kind of light up their homes.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because I can look at it in one side as a symbol of who Christ is in our lives, but I also see it as a way that as a whole community, we are all celebrating light in some way. And I know a lot of people don't really get who the light of the world is, but I feel like there's this a nod to who Jesus is, even by people who don't know him. So I don't know. I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's
It
what
absolutely made sense. Yes.
There, so.
I love that. I mean, it is. It's such a, the church founder fathers, I think we're so smart. I mean, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. You know what I mean? They're so smart in how they they take this kind of winter solstice season celebration, and it coincides with the end of a year. It coincides with rebirth, it light in the darkness, and whether that happened over time or was intent, I don't know, but it is what we love about it, or what I love about it is it's light. It's putting these twinkly lights out, and I don't actually like that, but I like that other people do it. I love turning on the lights in the Christmas tree with no other lights on. It's one of the few times a year I really like candles. It is this, and maybe there is this underlying just connection, because it is about Christ and he is the light of the world. But there's this man, I think it's just really, really poignant, the Christ birth story, and you have the shepherds and the angels, and you've got, later on the Magi coming in, and you have this meeting of diverse backgrounds and cultures and status, and nobody cares, because joy to the world, Christ has come. It is the king is right there. And I do think that's what you see in the grocery store, and whether people know it or not, is, we're all in the darkness and he's the light.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Thanks for your message a couple of weeks ago, because that's kind of what that points at is this season. There's more of a common identity, as you would put it,
that's
or
good.
at least an adjective that comes from a common identity, common adjective,
Yeah.
just joy and light. And but yeah, and how even as diverse as we are in culture, and we can still come together, because for a few weeks, few months, we got this common thing that we're joyous in. I like that. Yeah.
I'd say let's just pray and
Yeah.
move with anticipation into the season of Advent with I'll say thankfulness. I'm throwing all the keywords out here.
Yeah.
Thankfulness of where we've been, even the silence, and how God's patiently moves us towards an awareness that he's been with us the whole time. That's the prayer. Maybe I don't need to pray. That was good enough.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for participating throughout this whole season too. This was a little bit of an experiment, and a little bit less of a commitment from a day-to-day standpoint, but when we did these, it was a bigger commitment. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. All right.
Thank you.